Welcome back to the lab. We've done a setup video with this mat. We've done our first build video with this top. See if I can get this to actually perform for me. Hopefully that's coming through. And now it's time to talk about hacks. So our first hack is going to be the one that I've been wanting to do for a long time. And it's these solar garden lights. This is just the head of the light. This is an old one. Thus the discolorations and everything. It's been outside for a while. It's now inside while I work on it. This was one that I did. There's a bunch of different things you can do to these. Let me just sort of demonstrate one of them real quick. Let's see if I can find myself a battery. Need one handy. Cheapy, but it'll demonstrate. Now you can put regular batteries in these, but the one thing to know about putting a regular battery, so hack number one, putting in a battery, a regular alkaline battery, this is Harbor Freight, into a solar garden light. This one's also discolored, and we'll talk about that in a second. There's so many things to cover here. Regular battery fit into one of these lights, and now you can see I've got a, hopefully that's coming through as a blue light. Let me try and shine it down on the surface here. In fact, let's turn out the light. Should make it a little bit more obvious there that is blue light. So hack number one, you can put a different battery in here, but the warning on that is if you put a regular alkaline or heavy duty or whatever you get at your local dollar store, or if you go to the big box wherever you're buying them, Costco, they're not rechargeable batteries. And the problem with putting a non-rechargeable battery in is that you've got this solar cell here, and if you put it out in the garden, it's going to try and charge a non-rechargeable light. Not a great idea. I've tried various things like covering up the solar cell with electrical tape, something that the light can't get through. Fine, then you're not trying to charge the battery, but it also means that this battery is lighting up this light all day long, all 24 hours. Not just at nighttime when you're actually going to see it, but during the day when you're not going to be able to see it. So that's one hack you can do. You can just swap out the battery. To get into it, I tend to, when I'm working on these things, I just keep the screws that come with it. I keep them in the shell here until I'm actually ready to put it outside or put it into service somewhere. Then I'll actually put the screws in. The way these things work, you've got these two holes here where there will be two screws. Actually, I shouldn't say, I can't guarantee that your solar garden light, wherever you buy it, is going to have the same setup. But basically, what you're going to find is somehow there's going to be some way of taking this thing apart. Once you get the screws out, or once you get it opened up, you're going to find a circuit board. On that circuit board, most likely you're going to find a 4-pin chip like this one, which is just ubiquitous. It is so common in all of the solar garden lights. What it does is it regulates everything from the solar panel here to the charging the battery to actually lighting up the light. Some of your units will have a switch. What I usually end up doing is these switches are so cheap, I end up bypassing the switch. We'll talk about that in a minute. But you end up with this tiny little circuit board that has all of these functions on it, and not a whole lot of components, so it's not terribly hard to hack these things. So we've talked about the battery, we've talked about that chip, we've talked about the solar panel. You can cover the solar panel if you don't want the charging function. Stuff is dripping out of this right now because of the corrosion. I just happened to pick this one first to show you. The other thing you should know is on most of these, you're going to find this little component like this one. Let me find my magnifying glass. Let's see if I can get a better shot in video of this. This component here with the green background is an inductor. Inductors are like coils. I don't want to get too deep into the weeds here, but that inductor, the value of that inductor controls how bright this light is going to be. It regulates how much current is going into this LED. Again, also LED, another part you can hack. So the reason I kind of started working on this video today is because I got a bunch of these I kind of need to fix with regards to that inductor. Now this inductor, if you Google reading the color codes, those color bands that you see on there, if you Google that, you'll find out how to look at the value of an inductor. These are typically about 200 microhenries, or is it millihenries? I'll make a note here in a minute. I want to stay there because with that in combination with this particular chip, that's helping to program this chip to tell it how much of the current available in this battery to let out to this light, which controls the more current you put into this LED, the brighter it's going to get. So you can change this inductor if you have spare inductors, or you can add another inductor in parallel, and that will reduce the inductance. And actually, the lower the inductance here, the lower the value of that component, the brighter everything will get. So if I'm trying to create a certain color, or I put in a certain LED and it's just not bright enough, one hack is I can add another inductor in parallel with this. I can steal one out of another one of these solar garden lights. That'll cut the inductance in half and basically double the amount of current going into this. May or may not make it twice as bright, but it'll basically double the amount of current going in. So going from 2 milliamps to 4 milliamps, you're going to get a brighter light. I basically choose, when I'm dealing with the LEDs, one of two paths. Either an adapter that I've built, or I will try to pick an LED that is more efficient and gets brighter with less current. Okay, that kind of talks about all of that stuff. Let's look at one of the other hacks I can do here. Now what I'm going to do, because I'm going to pull out the soldering iron and I want this to be somewhat stable, first actually I'm going to pull the battery out. Now this is low voltage, so it's pretty safe to begin with, but I'm just going to be safer with that. So let's see, what do we got? How many hacks have I already talked about? Hack number 1 is change the battery. Hack number 2 is change the inductor. Hack number 3, if it bothers you enough, is these are the connections for that switch that I mentioned. These are really cheap switches. They're really flaky. If you look really carefully, you'll see that this one right here that I'm pointing to with the soldering iron is not connected to anything else. If you look at the traces on that board, it's not connected to anything else. We don't need to do anything with this one. But if we want this to be always on, we can solder these two together. And it can be a little bit tricky because generally you don't want to create a solder bridge, but in this case you kind of do. Now if you can't get this to cooperate with you, you can put a tiny little piece of wire in there to connect them together. But I'm trying to create an intentional solder bridge. There we go. I've created the bridge. Now this thing will always be on. So if I put the battery back in, you will see that the light is on. And the only way this light turns off is if I expose it to light, by turning the solar panel up towards the light. So in sunlight this would shut off, and it's trying to charge actually. So if I want to keep a regular battery in here, so what are we up to? New battery was hack number 1. Different inductors, hack number 2. Soldering the switch is hack number 3. Hack number 4, cover your solar panel with electrical tape. Let me get a different roll of tape here. Now I could do this a little bit neater, But just for the sake of demonstration, I'm trying to peel the tape off the roll here. I tend to pull out scissors and be neat about it, but the problem with that is then it's harder to pull it off. So basically, I'm just saying, literally, grab a piece of tape and put it on there, grab another piece of tape, and then when it's completely covered, your solar panel is effectively dead. It's not going to do anything. It's not going to be able to charge. But that's the only time you really want to do that is if you've got a regular non-rechargeable battery. So now let's talk about the inductors. I'll go back to that. I'm going to put this one away. Actually, I'm going to take the battery out so I can use it for other demonstrations. Oh, I suppose I should mention, if you want to clean up the corrosion, it's not a perfect solution, but if you get some Q-tips and some rubbing alcohol, you can get in there and you can try and clean a lot of that corrosion out, and that'll help you out. But generally speaking, you just don't want the corrosion. I'm basically going through a whole bunch of old ones and trying to retrofit them for various different experiments. Let's see, let's pull this one out. All right, this one has an extra inductor. No, actually, this has a different inductor on it. Instead of the inductor that used to be mounted underneath the circuit board, I've mounted a different inductor on top. And this one, if I look at the color code, and I'm not sure how well that's going to come through, that's a 150, 150. You know, I'm sorry, I forget if it's milli or micro. I'll put that up here. But it's just the rating of an inductor, and that's the range you want to be in. Is I forget if it's milli or micro. But anyway, I ended up putting a slightly different one on here that would make this light brighter, and I'm going to guess that this one is probably yellow. Yep. Yellow is notoriously hard. Let me turn off the light and demonstrate that it is truly yellow. Hopefully that's coming through. You can see it's really not all that bright. Yeah, hopefully you can see the reflection on the black there, but it is yellow. So yellow is something that I have had real problems with in the past. And that's why I've taken to putting lower inductors, lower values on here so I can pump more power into it. But the problem with that is the more power you suck out of the battery, the faster you drain the battery. Let me grab another one. And this might also be a yellow. I just put a bunch of these aside because they had one problem or another. Let's see. Oh, no, it's actually a green. And that's actually pretty efficient. So you can see, hopefully you can see that's the shaded green that I have. Here comes the light. And now I'm not sure why I put this one aside. This appears to have the right roughly 200 or 220. I'm just going to say millihenries even if I'm wrong. I think it's actually micro. But 200, 220 is about standard for these things. Some of them don't have the AAA cell. They have a button cell. Some of the bigger ones have bigger batteries. I'm not sure why I put that one aside. I have other things to demonstrate though. So, I did mention before that one of the hacks was replacing the LED. Now, replacing the LED, you have to find where the LED comes through the circuit board and desolder the one that came with it, and then you have to have another LED ready to go. And you put that LED in, you have to get the polarity right or it won't turn on. There is usually with an LED there is a long leg and a short leg. The long leg is usually positive, but then you have to know which side here is which. In the case of this particular design, I know that this leg here is negative and that leg is positive. Once you get that figured out, if you're buying a bunch of them from the same source, then it's not a big deal to replace them all, depending on your soldering skills and dexterity. Moving on, this is the adapter that I was talking about. I designed this and I'm considering selling. So if you're interested in getting some of these, and there's also another hack on this. This is, let me show you one of the boards before it's built. This is the board, and I'm considering selling these. Basically what it is allows you to put a 4-pin LED on there. Now that 4-pin is because you have one common pin, and you have one for red, one for green, and one for blue, and then you have spaces here to put resistors depending on what values you want for red, green, and blue. And that's what I've done with this one. And in fact, this one, the blue, is not even hooked up. If you look here, hopefully that's coming through. The blue has nothing connected to it, so there's not going to be a blue component to this, so it's going to tend towards yellowish red colors. I can put the battery in there, and we can find out what color I set up here with my little adapter board. The beauty of these is with these 4-pin LEDs, you can create almost any color under the sun. Alright, well that didn't exactly go as planned, but whoever makes a video and everything goes exactly to plan, huh? So I'm going to pull the battery here because I want to check something else. I did manage to reestablish that solder bridge there, which takes care of that hack. But what I'm wondering about is if there might be a problem with the connection to the actual LED. So there's a couple of ways I can deal with that. One, I can get another battery instead of using this circuit. And this is a 2032 battery, a button cell. And you can see there's a plus sign on that side. Hopefully that's coming through. So that is the positive side. I know from most of these that the far end is actually negative and the closer end is positive. I'm going to attempt to put this battery on here and see if I can get that LED to light up. So I'm going to rotate it kind of in my favor here. Yeah, that should pretty much... So this should be enough to power that LED. And it is. It's a little hard. There we go. Hopefully that's coming through, that it is lit up. So there's some other problem going on here. Now, there's another hack that I was going to do with this before I got caught up in all of the issues, and that is the fact that I now have two of these inductors back to back. Hopefully I can get that on camera. And yeah, I'm hoping that's it. And so what I want to do, actually, this was done so that I could make that color brighter. I'm trying to re-standardize a bunch of these old units, so I'm going to knock this one off simply by melting the solder and flinging up the... Yeah. I managed to pick up one end. Once I get one end up, I should be able to just melt the solder and the whole thing should fall off. That's because I added it on the top of the board. It is not falling off that easily. It's still connected. There we go. That's got it off. Now I can clean everything again. The cleaning really just helps with the reliability. It's not absolutely necessary, but it's not something that I always do, so now that I got a problem I'm trying to diagnose, I'm going to clean until I'm sure what I'm looking at here. I mean, that's the whole board basically cleaned with one end of the cotton swab, and these are the cheapy dollar store cotton swabs. The better manufactured ones don't shred quite as badly. And there's probably an even better solution than that, but that's what I'm working with. So, I've now restored that. Let me try and put the battery in. See if that was, yep, that may have been part of it. It is now lit up. Let me see if I can, now this is a yellowish color on here. I don't know how well that's going to come through. Let's see if I can get a piece of paper. Hopefully that'll kind of come through. I'm going to figure out the right angle. There we go. Okay, light's coming back on. All right, that's that one fixed, and the hack's actually removed. If it still wasn't working, the next thing I would suspect is that there's something wrong with this connection. Now, the way this adapter board works, and again, without going into theory or anything, there are individual red, green, and blue lights in these 4-pin LEDs. Whether you get the common negative or common positive, common cathode or common anode. And then there are right here, hoping this will come through. Actually, let me put this on the board here so I can point. You should see a plus and a minus. Actually, when I designed the board, I think I actually got those kind of wrong. It really depends. If you're using common anode or common cathode, then the plus or minus would apply a little bit differently. But what I do is I put the resistors on for the values that I want for the color I'm trying to create. There is also in the middle here, you can see a tiny little plus sign. That plus sign goes to the common leg of the LED. The plus and minus then may be adjusted according to whether you have cathode or anode, plus or minus. They poke through, you solder everything on that side, or you can solder on this side. I put then 2 little wires into this one and that one and stick them through so they plug into where you normally would put the LED on one of these. So let me see if I can actually remove this one, since I've done so much hacking on one. I think I can skip the next one I was going to show you. I need my solder sucker. I'm going to try and remove the solder. Now in this case you probably want to have the battery out. You want to have the thing kind of snapped in there for stability. Depending on the design you have, it might not be that simple. You have to figure out what you're going to do, but that's got one leg. Now let's see if I can get the other leg. Heat it up, suck it out. And with some luck, I've done enough to remove this entire board. Yep, there we go. I removed the entire board. Now, if I want to put a different LED on there, let me see if I've got something handy. Let's see. That's something. Let's find out what color this is. Now, if you need to test an LED and you need to figure out plus and minus, because this one it might not be obvious, the legs have been cut. So I don't know necessarily which side is plus or minus. There are other ways to look at it, but I'm just going to put the battery in here. It does not light up, so I have it backwards. If I put the battery in here now, it lights up, and hopefully you can see the blue on my hand. So that tells me that the slightly longer leg is positive. So here's the hack. If I want to make this a blue light, and I know that the far side is actually negative, I want to actually rotate this so I have the negative leg going in. I need to stick it through here and thread it in. It's a little fiddly, but there we go. I got it in. Now, I've sort of unhacked the whole thing. I need to solder this in. But I removed my extra inductor, which would have made it brighter. It should be bright enough. And that looks reasonable. These boards are kind of torn up, so we'll see. Yep, I can see it lit. Oh, it lit up for a moment. A different problem now? Something came disconnected, or... Oh, I've got a contact problem with the battery, but hopefully you can see that is now lit up blue. So yeah, multiple problems on some of these. At some point, your dollar store solar garden light becomes worth not anything but maybe some of the parts if you're good at harvesting them. But that's kind of all the hacks that I know. All right, and one last little tip. I keep talking about the battery here, and in case you're kind of wondering, this is a 1.5 volt battery. The alkaline, the regular, the old-fashioned batteries, the non-rechargeables are 1.5 volts. The rechargeables are 1.2, and most LEDs require 2 to 3 volts to turn on. It's still flaky. They require more voltage than the battery will actually provide straight up, and that's another one of the functions of this little 4-pin chip that's hanging off the side of the circuit board. It's what they call a booster circuit, and it takes this voltage and it actually uses that inductor that was down here to create a charge. It's kind of hard to explain without getting really deep into it. You might want to look up bigclive.com and a video on Joule Thief. He explains it a little bit more and he shows you another circuit for it. But they've basically built that into this chip, and essentially what it does is it takes the existing voltage and raises it until it's enough to actually turn the device on, like this LED. So if the LED requires 2 volts, it doesn't matter if you have 1.5 or 1.2 or 3 volts here, it will raise it as needed to meet the voltage to turn this on. Once this turns on, it immediately turns back off again, but then it starts to build up a charge and raise the voltage again, and it does this so fast, like literally tens of thousands of times a second, that you can't tell the difference. You can't tell that it's being turned on and off. But it does have one side effect, and maybe we'll talk about another hack to this circuit that allows you to use some of the LEDs that are out there have another chip built into the LED, and like the flashing red, green, and blue, the RGB LEDs, the ones that flash, those have a circuit built into them. And because this is turning on and off, basically it's thinking, oh, it turns on, when that LED turns on, it's programmed to automatically start at one color, like red. So if you put a flashing RGB LED in this circuit as is, it's just going to show you that initial color red because it keeps getting turned on and then immediately turned off. So hopefully that made some sense, but that's why you can use a 1.5 volt, a 1.2 volt. These things work down to about 0.7 volts before they shut off completely. And I actually have a stack of batteries that are 0.7 volts, but they still have some charge in them. So I built another thing, and maybe I'll show you on another hack video how you can combine basically 2 of these together and to harvest 2 batteries, because 2 times 0.7 volts is 1.4 volts. That's enough to power up this circuit and light up an LED. And so I use that to drain those batteries down even further before I end up ultimately recycling them. So that's it for this video. I think I gave you 5 hacks. Let's see. I mean, you can bridge the switch so it doesn't turn on and off, but it keeps the circuit on. You can cover the solar panel with tape. This one has a little bit of tape on it. You can change the LED. You can change the inductor, and you can change out the battery. So that's 5 hacks from a solar garden light. Thanks for watching.